final loose end of the Philadelphia 76ers offseason continues to be the future of restricted free agent Quentin Grimes, with his market seemingly drying up in restricted free agency. As Daryl Morey continues to drive a hard bargain, the uncertain future of the Sixers guard continues to hang in the balance. We have a couple new voices chiming into the conversation regarding what this contract could possibly look like, and I do want to sort through what is being said, whether or not this makes sense for this Sixers team, and put a little bit of sense on this entire situation. So to dive right into the latest updates that we do have, as we know, this has been a situation that has been hanging in the balance for quite some time. We have a new article from Heavy Sports that writes, Quentin Grimes is yet to reach an agreement over a new contract with the Philadelphia 76ers. Grimes is a restricted free agent this summer and will likely be seeing a pay rise from the Sixers. In a recent article for Bleacher Report, Dan Favale predicted that the Sixers and Grimes will ultimately land on a deal worth $67 million over 4 years with a player option on the final year. Quote, the absence of a deal and concretely reported price point suggests the two sides are far apart, Favale wrote. That could pave the way for a signs the qualifying offer situation. This dance between player and team is giving off an air of inevitability. Grimes and the Sixers will reach a multi-year agreement with some team flexibility that guarantees him a notch above the mid-level exception money. Prediction: Quentin Grimes signs with the Sixers on a 4-year, $67 million deal with a team option that final season. Now, to continue on in the article, it writes, or actually, let me interject here a quick bit. I do think this is one of the more difficult situations to ultimately put a price point on what Quentin Grimes is worth. He's had one of the more bizarre career trajectories to this point, with him already suiting up for 4 different NBA teams and him having his best success in one of the more dire situations. That it was a nightmare season for the Sixers last year, and this is not breaking news to any of you listening. But Quentin Grimes does deserve credit for making the most of it, but how much of that is real is still a little bit difficult to sort through. And I do want to dive into this portion that we've heard in the past from Jake Fischer, and the article references saying, according to Jake Fischer, who was speaking on August 8th, the Bleacher Report live stream, Grimes is expected to re-sign with Philadelphia. However, there doesn't appear to be a rush to get a deal over the line. Quote, I can absolutely say that the Sixers, various people in the organization whom, when asked, keep saying that Quentin Grimes is their top priority, Fischer said, and that they are going to bring Quentin Grimes back. It's just a matter of dollars and cents. There is some buzz of him taking the qualifying offer too. Fischer continued, I do think at the end of the day, as things get to September and maybe even closer to October, that there will be enough synergy to get a deal done between Quentin Grimes and the Sixers. Quentin Grimes has never made significant money throughout his tenure as an NBA player. He absolutely stands to benefit from taking a significant offer, whatever it ends up being from Philadelphia. And to jump back in here, this is sort of where it ties into the Quentin Grimes situation, because there's sort of two different parts of this ultimate debate here. For Quentin Grimes individually, that's sort of the expected trajectory for a player of his ilk here is you play out your rookie contract and this is your big payday. That is now the time for that to occur in his mind here. And in fairness to him, he delivered for the second half of the season. That he looked like a guy worth on the fringes of $20 million. Now, from the Sixers angle here, they're not negotiating the good faith of just because it's your turn that you deserve that type of pay raise. And with the context of the Sixers roster, it becomes a little bit even more difficult with Jared McCain, with Tyrese Maxey, with VJ Edgecombe being the third overall pick here. It is a guard-heavy roster, and we've all been plenty cognizant of that. I think that directly right there is why it would be a disastrous situation for both sides for Quentin Grimes to accept the qualifying offer. With that in mind, what exactly that means is it is $8.7 million that he has paid this season, and that he is an unrestricted free agent next offseason. Now, in its current context, why the situation has dried up and why there is no market for Quentin Grimes directly is he's a restricted free agent. And all that means directly is the Sixers have to have a chance to match whatever deal is thrown his direction. Now, other teams around the NBA are plenty aware of this exact same situation, and that is why they're not jumping out of their pants to send an offer to try and get this guy, because they know at the end of the day, the Sixers are probably just going to match whatever is sent their way. And from the salary cap perspective here, one thing to keep in mind is the Sixers have the Quentin Grimes bird rights here. And what that means exactly, to give a brief reminder, as I've referenced this before, that in the NBA birds rights, named after Larry Bird, they allow teams to re-sign their own free agents, even if it means exceeding the salary cap. A player gains bird rights after playing for the same team for 3 consecutive seasons under the same contract. These rights allow teams to offer contracts that can exceed the salary cap, potentially up to the maximum allowable salary. Now, the quick note on top of this here is it gets a little complicated when guys are traded. There are some unique circumstances from case to case basis here. The bottom line and all we need to care about here is the Sixers hold those in regard to Quentin Grimes. That does not, however, completely withdraw them from the other salary cap implications. And to give an idea of where the Sixers are looking at currently and pull up the salary cap here, that there is $7.79 million under the first tax apron there, and $18.59 million under that second apron. That is the number that we really need to keep an eye on here. And I am certain that Daryl Morey is plenty cognizant of that I think that is probably what he's truly negotiating at, is trying to make sure they stay under the second apron, which does come with some legitimate roster construction hurdles that are provided, such as the way that you can make trades, how many players you have access to, the buyout market, things like that are all impacted if you go with that number. There is the closest thing the NBA has ever seen to a hard cap, and I think honestly, if you want like a real opinion here, it is fair to qualify this as a hard cap, something that the NBA has tried to avoid for years, for decades to this point, and I do think that this new CBA did fall down that hole, even if they were unaware of at the time. Now, to bring it back to Quentin Grimes directly here, I did want to pull up this last portion of the article, which I think states the case for why the Sixers do not want to overpay him. And the article writes, according to an anonymous NBA executive who spoke with Fred Katz of The Athletic, the Sixers should approach their negotiations with cautious. Quote, the way the cap environment is now, why would you spend $20 million on Quentin Grimes when you can get Gary Trent Jr. for a minimum, the executive said. We shouldn't just sign young players because they're young. You've got to believe Grimes is going to develop into your starting backcourt partner with Tyrese Maxey. Grimes will undoubtedly have a role to play within Nick Nurse's rotation. However, playing him based on what he achieved last season would be foolish. The Sixers likely use Grimes as a role player moving forward, and thus he will not be as impactful as he was upon joining the franchise midway through an injury-hit 24-25 season. Now, to tell the Quentin Grimes story as a whole, I did want to reference his stats here. I mentioned that he's played for 4 different franchises to this point, and his stats have been pretty much all over the place. After starting his collegiate career at Kansas, he made the transfer over to Houston, where I do think he found his identity as a collegiate basketball player. Then he was drafted by the New York Knicks and looked at as a fairly highly regarded prospect there, and in his rookie season was very limited in his opportunity. Played in 46 games, just 17.1 minutes per game there. Then he really popped off the page in year 2. Started 66 of the 71 games for the Knicks, 29.9 minutes per game, averaged 11.3 points, 3.2 rebounds, 2.1 assists, and shot 38.6% from 3 on 5.7 attempts per game. Then ultimately, in that next season, he was traded just 45 games into the year after playing with the New York Knicks and sent to the Detroit Pistons. He suited up for just 6 games there before signing with the Dallas Mavericks or being traded to the Dallas Mavericks that next offseason, to which he showed a bit of promise across 47 games, averaging 10.2 points, 3.8 rebounds, and 2.1 assists. Still shot the 3 ball relatively well, 39.8% on 4.3 attempts per game, so good volume and good efficiency there. Then he stepped to the Philadelphia 76ers, where he essentially had the permanent green light and made the most of the opportunity. He averaged 21.9 points per game, 4.5 assists, 5.2 rebounds there, and still shot 37.3% from 3 on 7.9 3-point attempts per game. Quentin Grimes is a good basketball player, but I do not believe the version of Quentin Grimes we saw the second half of the season is here to stay. I think it is naive to believe this guy should be penciled in as the starting guard in this rotation. When you have a guy like Tyrese Maxey, who is a legitimate all-star and has proven it at the NBA level. When you have a guy like Jared McCain, who had some of the most impressive rookie flashes that we've seen. This is an interesting concoction of overall roster talent. And Nick Nurse, the 4 most consistent and reliable players that he's going to be able to count on this year are all at the guard position with those 4 names. With Jared McCain, with Tyrese Maxey, with VJ Edgecombe, and with Quentin Grimes. Those are your playmakers that he's going to have to count on, and obviously we're still holding out hope for the guys like Paul George and Joel Embiid. I do believe Quentin Grimes is a adequate basketball player that can contribute to winning, but I do not believe he is the 21.9 point per game guy that he showed during the second half of the season. Now for Grimes camp here, they're going to continue to showcase those numbers, continue to make the case for why they deserve a set dollar amount because of those specific statistics. It is a tough spot to be in, but with no competition from the outside, both these sides are going to continue to play the long game. The biggest thing that I think we need to keep our mind out for here is do not let him accept the qualifying offer. Do not let this guy push his way to unrestricted free agency next year, because this is a disaster for both sides. For the Sixers, it pretty much guarantees that he will not be back in Philadelphia, not next year, but the following year. And for Quentin Grimes specifically, I think he's going to cost himself quite a bit of money if that is the case. That I do think, in all reality, there is no world in which he's a locked-in 30-plus minute per game guy on this Sixers roster. That there is a real chance that from day one, VJ Edgecombe is just better than Quentin Grimes at basketball. And I do think he's a guy that fits Nick Nurse's system better than Quentin Grimes does. I think Grimes is a good defender, a solid defender, but VJ Edgecombe is an off-the-charts defender and a guy who has the athleticism and has the ball instincts that fits exactly what Nick Nurse wants to build this roster into, that what he had his greatest success in Toronto with. So it's going to be a bizarre situation and continue to be. I do not foresee this ultimately finding a conclusion anytime in the short term. That Jake Fischer mentioned October potentially as a date where this only comes down. One way or another, he's going to be back in a Sixers uniform, but I do think we should keep our eye on do not let him accept the qualifying offer. That would be a bad thing for the Sixers and Quentin Grimes both there, and I think both parties should have a little bit of common sense to work together and find some common ground. So we will see ultimately how things resolve itself, but a little bit of new input that I did want to highlight right here on Sixers Digest. Let me know what you guys think about all that in the comments there. Appreciate each and every one of you guys who are tuning in here. I know it is the dead of the offseason, but we continue to plug on through, so make sure you're smashing that subscribe button and ride along with us. Drop a like on this video here, those thoughts below, and I'll be back talking with you next time. Peace.